everyone. Welcome back to another fabulous episode of Interpreting in Healthcare, brought to you by the Standards and Training Committee at the National Council for Interpreting in Healthcare. I'm Eliana Lobo, president of the NCIHC and also chair of the Standards and Training Committee, and often the most frequent host of this podcast. And I'm really thrilled to bring to you today someone that I will hope will inspire you the same way she has inspired me, in that we share a lot of things working interpreters with this person, and her name is Berthine Crèvecoeur West. And she is better known as a trailblazing force in the world of business strategy and executive consulting. But she started out like a lot of us have started out. She has diverse skill set and a passion for fostering inclusive environments. She's a certified diversity executive, bringing over 2 decades of experience to the table. Berthine has an executive MBA from Quantic School of Business and Technology, an MA in Government and Politics from St. John's University, and coinciding certifications, including a WOSB, which I believe is a woman-owned business. Is it
All business.
all business? Yes. And an EDWOSB. And she is an alumnus of Leadership Gwinnett, as well as an executive board member of Guide Inc., also a member of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce, and the Haitian American Chamber of Commerce. Berthine has been a global keynote speaker. She's a best-selling author, an award-nominated podcast host, and editor-in-chief of Global Fluency magazine. She's been featured in CBS, NBC, Fox, Voyage, ATL, Shout Atlanta, 11 Alive News, Tough Talk Show, and countless podcast interviews, including this one. She lives in Gwinnett County, Georgia, with her family and enjoys spending her time traveling and trying new foods and experiencing new cultures. But you started out way back when as an interpreter, didn't you? So welcome. We want to hear all about your story, Berthine.
Thank you, Eliana, for having me. As I said while we're in the green room, I'm a fan of you and all that you do. I'm truly honored and humbled to share the space with you today and being invited to this podcast. So this is the highlight of the week. I was looking forward to this, so I'm super excited about it. Just thank you for that introduction. And I also want to add one more board that's of import. I'm a board member of the Global Trans Equity Project as well.
Oh, very nice.
Yes. And I'll share more about how that plays into my origin story, because I feel interpreters are superheroes. I've always believed this. I've always said this. In my capacity as an interpreter, I've gotten to meet the most amazing, brilliant, passionate, dedicated, selfless people, and the beauty of language and communication and just cultural competence and curiosity has been this tapestry that has woven into the fabric of my life in the most dynamic and wonderful way. So I always say interpreting is my origin story, and I'm just so happy to be here and hope that my story really helps inspire the next person to become an interpreter, because it is such an important role in our global society, in our local societies, and it's a way for us to really make sure that we are advocates and linguistic strategists for not only our LEP community, but for our provider community. We are the bridge that links those two cultures, and to do it is no small feat. I'll paraphrase a quote, you can have 10 fingers, but it doesn't make you a concert pianist. This is why I believe in interpreter education. I believe in getting the highest possible credential you can get in it, because the work is that important. So thank you again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And I love that analogy of the 10 fingers. When I used to train incoming new hires at the hospital, anyone with direct patient contact was required to get training on how to partner with an interpreter, which I wish everyone would do, because if you haven't done it before, you're not exactly sure what is the best way to proceed, and a little bit of orientation goes a long way. And the simile or metaphor that I used to use was, look, most of us like music, but not everyone can get up on stage and sing a song that pleases everyone. And yet all of us in the audience know when someone's doing a good job or a bad job. And interpreting is a lot like that, even if you speak more than one language. Not everyone can get up on stage and not suffer that stage fright or not have that panic attack or be comfortable and perform at their best in front of unknown people, right? You always have an audience as an interpreter. So I think that helps make the point, but so does the 10 fingers. Yes, we all have 10 fingers, and anyone who's tried to play the piano realizes, well, this is above my pay grade.
Exactly. I'm a violinist by training. I am not a piano player. My son is. And when he's playing, I literally have no idea how he's making that magic happen because it's a language that is completely foreign to me. So I stay in my lane.
So looking back, we started with the origin story. What made you, well, what stands out? What made you think, I'm interpreting now, what more can I do? Or was there a moment, that helped shift your outlook or your view to explore something beyond interpreting?
Sure, sure. So I'll start out with going as far back as I can remember. My first teacher, my first inspiration, my first just motivator to really jump and embrace my multilinguality was my mother. She happened to be a French teacher when she lived in Haiti, and she came here for opportunities that weren't afforded to her, as a woman growing up in her time. She was a very modern woman that grew up in a very traditional society, and she wanted to come here and really have opportunities for her children. Mm-hmm. And she made it a point to make sure, she and my uncles back in Haiti made it a point to make sure that I was very much aware of Haitian culture. I was very much aware of our history, of our languages. We speak 2 languages. I was very much aware that my grandmother's Dominican heritage also plays a part into my life, which is why I also, sought to speak Spanish and enjoy it very much. I say my Spanish is for the 3 F's: food, fun, and family. So I will never interpret in Spanish, but it's one of those things where she really developed in me, nurtured and grew not only a love, but a pride of being able to have those core competencies, those gifts, those skills. So fast forward to, when I'm going into college and exiting college and working, as a professional person, I found that language skills were a perk. They were an added benefit, both, professionally, but also financially. Especially as a young person, I was able to elevate within the ranks of my administrative duties, going from like the lobby clerk to the admin assistant to the executive assistant of the managing partner of the firm because of my language skills. So that to me was an automatic indicator that this is something that I can do, but I also had to make sure that I learned. It's one thing to speak and know, it's another to know the rules of language and how language should properly function at a high level. Because if we know it at a lower register, we have to, I think, learn it at a higher register because we'll be communicating with people who are not fluent in both. So this was really important to me as well. And then when you're learning different languages, you have to learn the cultures of the languages being spoken. So what I do know for sure is Senegalese French sounds different from France, European French, the standardized French, but Haitian French sounds the same as European French, but Canadian French sounds very different. So Senegalese French, you roll your R's as you would in Spanish. Canadian French sounds a bit of a bit like English sometimes to me in my ears, so the next layer of just enjoyment and curiosity, intellectual curiosity was, with language comes culture. So I always have to think about, okay, this is the language. Now, what are the cultural norms surrounding this language, right? So that became fun. And then you have to, with culture comes also learning about sociological differences of the groups that speak those languages within those cultures. So it became an onion, if you will, layered on top of layers on top of layers. So it became this beautiful experience that was, something that I really enjoyed uncovering and experiencing. But then when I moved here to Georgia, my background was working in investment banks and law firms. And I was preparing to go to law school at one point because I was like, well, that's what the family expects. And so I'd come from a generation or several generations of attorneys and doctors. And I was just like, well, I want to help people. So I realized soon enough that was not my path. And I had to find another way to do the things I wanted to do. And so when I got here in Georgia to Atlanta, I had one job, as I like to say. And when I found out I was 3 months pregnant, I got laid off from said job because they were downsizing and I worked in HR. And I will say this, it was a job that I absolutely hated. It was the bane of my existence. We were so new to Georgia, my husband and I. So I thought, okay, I'll do this, but I don't want to be here forever, right? And that's when that was like a door opening because I'd never been laid off before in my life. I had to call my mom and once I was done crying into my Haagen-Dazs, I said, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I've been working since I was 14 years old. And so, she gave me a path to follow. And as my mom was great to do, she yanked me back to reality verbally. And she's like, remember who you are. This is what needs to happen. Do X, Y, and Z. Get yourself sorted and it will work out. And, to that end, in that moment, I sat down, I drew a SWOT analysis and did an internal SWOT analysis. And that set the tone and became the framework of my current company now. And it was just so interesting to me. I listed my skills. I listed what I love to do that I was great at, what I love to do that I wasn't great at, what I hated to do that I was great at, and what I didn't love doing that I also was not great at, right? And one of the things I loved that stood out very clearly was languages. And I said to myself, okay, I love languages. I can learn languages. For me, this is something that's fun. What can I do with this? And I spoke to a few colleagues and friends here, and interpreting popped up. And, my mom always said, if you're going to do something, get your training at it, become the best that you can be at it, get your highest level of certification in this thing. So I went to do that. I took a 40-hour course. I became the first nationally certified interpreter for healthcare in the state of Georgia for Haitian Creole. I wasn't even born in Haiti. So to me, this was a particular coup. I loved it so much. And that's how important it was to me. I worked as a translator initially for French and English. And what ended up happening was I started to see there was a population here that needed Haitian Creole. So I learned how to translate in Creole. I learned how to use higher level terminology to break down ideas. I decided to just keep pushing myself. And it so happened, it's really serendipitous. My son was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5. And I saw this as an opportunity to learn more about, autism for our sake here, for our son's sake, but also for the communities that I serve, the school system, the providers. So then I started to focus on IEP and IFSP specific terminology because, we had to break down those high level, high register words that were even challenging for me as a native speaker of English and as a parent who had not heard of them before. So how would I make that relatable to someone who is an LEP, who is not fluent in English? what could I do? Yes, we're supposed to draw word pictures, verbally, but how could I make them understand linguistically, but then culturally what this actually means, right? So it was like a mystery within an enigma, within a little box that I had to figure out. And while that was challenging, I was up for it because I know the power of proper interpretation, how that changes a life, how it changes a family dynamic, how it impacts a community and a world. And so I think I answered the question.
And there's two things I want to round back to because they really stood out to me. And the first one is nested inside that idea of all the layers of the onion, right? It's never just one thing, it's a world of things. And the fact that the interpreter is there for the provider too. That's the thing that I would train my interpreters to say when a family member would say, oh no, I always interpret for my mom, my grandmother. It's like, that's fine, go ahead. But a staff interpreter is going to remain in the room because they're not here only for your mom or your grandma. They're here for the provider too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we're bridging gaps not only of language, but of cultural expectations, of risk management, right? Due diligence, the world where law and medicine overlaps.
Law, medicine, and business, because medicine has become business. Hospital systems are or corporations, right? Even though they may be nonprofits, they still operate as such. And so I also think we're protecting the LEPs from unknowns that they're not even familiar with regard to that. Yeah. So our role is very important.
The cultural differences aren't just between the different language speakers. There are also cultural differences in interpreting in courtrooms versus interpreting in the exam. There's the culture of insurance.
Oh my gosh. Don't get me started, Eliana.
So the interpreter is traffic copping, in 3 dimensions, lots of different things. But also I was struck by the fact that the layoff, which could have been perceived as only a bad thing, to you ended up being this opportunity for new ideas to take root and new tools to be developed for the community. I think that was genius a genius example of making lemonade out of, I don't even want to say lemons because I too have a neurodivergent son, so I wouldn't call him a lemon. But yes, it's something that made you take stock in that moment. And how you react to what happens is really, I think, what dictates how much satisfaction you get out of your life. So kudos. And as my Italian grandmother would say, bravissima.
Thank you. I love that we're bringing that in, as I'm the Italian cook of my family. My mother doesn't know where it came from, but I'm glad it's a gift that I have. But I'll take the bravissima. Thank you so much. So I'll say grazie.
Very good.
I will say this. I will say the word no for me, I could have seen that as a no, like, that autism diagnosis, that laying off as a no. Now he can't do X, Y, and Z, or now I can't do X, Y, and Z. But I knew this. When I was laid off, I was very intentional. I was like, what can I do where the baby would be proud of me? And this was, again, I was 3 months pregnant. I didn't know who he was going to be, but I knew he'd be ours and we'd adore him. And now he's a spoiled little prince, which is how it should be. But I said, I want the baby to be proud of me. I did want to be proud of myself as well. But that particular thing was important to me. And then when we found out that he was a boy, that was also important for me because I wanted my son to be raised by a woman who can, right? And then can fill in the blank, do whatever she wants. But I wanted him to also see that women, through my example, can, period. Mom is dad's partner in every way. right? I really, I used to say I'm raising a feminist, but I really think that word would limit what I was trying to do. I'm raising a humanist, and I want him to.
That.
Thank you, thank you. And I want him to understand, girls and boys and everyone in between, we can do whatever it is that we set out to do. Now, I might want to become an astronaut. I can't do that now. But if I did want to do that, I'd have to learn how to do that so I could, right? So wanting to do something and thinking about doing it and dreaming it, that pathway has to be the pathway of learning and education. And that looks different for all of us. So with him being diagnosed as neurodivergent, I thought to myself, okay, we were told, I had the pleasure of working at Marcus Autism Center, which is based here in Atlanta, as an interpreter, but then going there as a parent was a different experience. Mm-hmm. Right? And I was told everything that he wouldn't be able to do in life at 2.5 years old. I don't subscribe to that for anyone, ever. I just think that, especially with children, they're so brand new, right? There's so much that we don't know about autism, even for parents of neurodivergent kids like you and me. And I love that we have that in common, but even as interpreters in healthcare, I always say I'm a retired interpreter, but once an interpreter, always an interpreter. I'm an interpreter in my heart all the time. And so, I said to myself, we cannot put limitations on children because that's not helpful. So whatever no was there, I took the letters NO, and I said, I'm going to change that to next opportunity. So what does...
That's great.
Thank you.
It's like improv. It really should be yes and, whatever gets thrown at me, okay, yes, and what are we going to do with it?
Exactly. What's next, right? And I didn't realize that I knew becoming a parent would change my life. I didn't realize that I would give birth to the person that would inspire me to my greater self, right? He's reconnected me to things that I didn't remember how much I loved. Even my love of Spanish, that has manifested into my love of Spanish music, but particularly his love of reggaeton. My husband happens to be from Jamaica, and I said to myself when he was born, I'm going to raise a Marc Anthony and a compa fan. Compa is Haitian.
There you go.
Yeah. So I said, I want you to love Haitian pop music, but you also must love Marc Anthony and a whole bunch of other people that I like. And then, of course, his dad was like, and I want him to love reggae music. He found his own genre of music. And because he loved hearing that so much, we in turn started to love it. So now I think I'm a bigger fan maybe than him, but we're competing for that. But, it's again, the power of language and interpretation taught me cultural competence. It was the natural next step in the evolution of me as a person, as a CEO, as a person in the world navigating this human experience alongside all of us all. So it was him being born into the world was an amazing experience for me and continues to be. He challenges me as teenagers are out to do. But, I couldn't imagine him not being anyone but him. And I think to myself, he's amazing. And my job is to help do what I did as an interpreter, to help other people understand him and him them. And so interpreting continues to show itself in my life in very specific ways, in very vague ways that I try to figure out, in very intentional ways. It's a beautiful, beautiful profession, but it's what the profession has given me. I could never give that much back to. I wouldn't even know how, but that's why I value the profession of interpreting so much. It just keeps on giving gifts.
So when you look at the current landscape, right? Mm-hmm. A few years ago when we introduced video remote interpreting at Harborview, what is it, 2008, I believe. Nobody was doing it. A lot of hospitals continued to resist, but then COVID came along and anyone and everyone who hadn't tested the waters got thrown into the deep end of the pool of remote
nightmare.
Right?
Yeah.
So I see AI coming on the scene very similarly. Like if you don't engage in the conversation early and help test what can we use right now, what still needs to be tweaked in order to be safely used in places like the courts where you're risking financial loss or loss of freedom, or the hospitals where you're risking a poorer health outcome, then there need to be some guardrails, not a chicken little, oh, we're afraid. No,
Yeah.
it's come, let us find some partners on that side of the spectrum for us to learn to speak their language and be
Sure.
able to give them the kind of feedback they need to come up with better tech. Better tech is going to help us all
Oh my
do
gosh.
more
Yeah.
and do it more efficiently and with fewer errors, but we need to be part of that conversation. What do you see currently as a challenge, whether it's for the profession or for small business owners or for interpreting
So
or
I
who
love
knows
that
what'll
question.
happen in November at the election?
Right, right. I love that question so much. I am a huge fan of AI. I think one of the biggest threats to AI is, and I love that example that you gave of Chicken Little, is of people being fearful of the unknown. So how do I liken it to meeting another person. How, initially sometimes we're apprehensive about meeting new people, to the point where it might be anxiety inducing for some, right? But what happens when we meet people, we have a conversation, we have icebreakers, we get to know them, we peel the layers away, right? I think the same should be done with AI. The people that will be left behind are those who choose not to learn some part of it, because AI has so much potential to change so much in every industry, in every sector. I think with regard to interpreting, interpreters, I'll say this. Back when I was a translator, and I was even having this conversation not too long ago with someone who wanted to become an interpreter, and they wanted to even delve deeper into their translation role. And I said, well, what are your CAT tools, right? Your computer assisted translation tools. And they said, oh, Google Translate. And I almost fell out of my chair because that is not a CAT tool, right? That is meant to be used by people who are already fully fluent in a language. If you need a phrase or a word, if you put a whole document in there, and I know this, it will, especially with legal terminology, an affirmative in the source document might be interpreted as or translated as a negative in the language that they're rendering it in. You have to be very careful with that. There are so many things that can go wrong, idiomatic expressions. It's not ready for any of that yet. But I do think the person that uses those, right, and I'm not adverse to that, but I do think you have to know what you're looking for. It's if you've forgotten a word, right? And you can confirm, yeah, that's the word I was thinking of, or that's the phrase, right? And we should limit it to that. I was corresponding with a colleague in Germany. I don't speak German. I eat German food, but that is the limit, right? And so I said, I do want to say something to them. How am I going to communicate with them? And I said, I'll go to Google Translate for that. And I'll tell them I'm using Google Translate to tell you this, this email. So please pardon any errors, right? We need to let people know what we're doing. But with regard to AI, I think interpreters fear, not all, but some interpreters fear that it will replace them. We need to put the brakes on that kind of chicken little thinking, because AI, in its current iteration, is programmed by humans. So it's not going to replace the people that are programming it and feeding it, right? So let's think about what AI is. We've had it for a very long time. Google Translate is AI. Your Alexa app or your Google app is AI. Your self-driving car is AI. I'm not going to shout out any particular brands because I'm not crazy about one of them. but there's AI all around us. If we really think about it, your cable service, there's so many things. Let's think about what AI can do for us. What if AI means a person who who is blind will be able to have greater independence because they will have a self-driving car? What about a neurodivergent children like ours, for self-driving cars or for communicative devices that can actually mimic their voice if they're unable to speak, right? Think about and I'll preface this by saying a lot of times people confuse intellectual capacity with an autism diagnosis, and they think both mean, like, an autism diagnosis means you're not an intellectually capable person. That's not at all true. You can be brilliant and be on the autism spectrum, right? So it's important that I make that point, because whether you're brilliant or not, you can be a neurotypical person like us and not be brilliant, right? So think about what that means for somebody, the freedom, the independence, the ability to contribute to society now that a barrier has been removed for them. So I think AI is the pathway to equitable access for information, for just basic life functionings, for higher level functionings. It's going to, and it's starting to, and at least for me, I know it adds value to my life, and I enjoy it. And I feel like it helps me be more productive because I know how I choose to use it. I know what I don't know. I learn. I make sure that my team learns, my family even. It helps me and my brain, the way my brain works. I don't think of things in a linear fashion per se. I think of them more as a mind map. And so it helps me structure all of that. It helps me, I love data. So it helps me aggregate my data at a rate that will save me so much time. What does that mean professionally? It means that my clients get accurate and early, if not on time, deliverables. It means, revenue for my company. It means more time because revenue is a tool. There's a Korean saying, don't chase the money, let the money chase you, right? So I work, yes, to generate revenue, but the revenue is a tool to do the things I really want. Travel, as we were discussing in the green room. I love to travel, love to eat, love to meet new people. So that buys me time to travel and spend with my family and visit friends. Buys me time to ideate and do nothing. Buys me time to write a newsletter. There's so much that AI can do, and I caution those who are fearful of it because they will be left behind if they choose not to learn. The person who will be successful is the one that dives into the pool. It doesn't have to be the deep end of the pool. Stick your toes in it, wiggle it around, right? See the temperature. Yeah. It's too cold.
And partner with the people that are building the tech, because tech keeps getting better and better. Inevitably, over time, it will be able to do everything, but it's not there yet. So why can't we be sitting at the table to help define what are the things that it does really well right now? Because that would free up interpreters to spend more time in those situations that AI isn't ready to handle yet. And I'm glad you brought up neurodivergency again, because I find some real parallels between how smart and clever AI is and those areas where it is yet to be that smart. Exactly. And those areas overlap a lot, I think, in the sectors that may confound neurodivergent kids, the areas of emotional nuance, gauging the temperature in the room. What's the power structure? Was that sarcasm or irony, or was that meant to be a critical remark? Was that negative? Was that positive? Those are things that I think a lot of neurodivergent kids struggle with figuring out in a social setting. And so does AI.
Absolutely.
Why can't we give this direct things like wayfinding, directions? When do I take my meds? Where's the parking structure? I'm a blind person. I need to carry a device that will tell me go 50 steps forward, and when you can take
Right.
a right or a left, take a right, go to the first bank of elevators, you want the third floor.
There you
Those
go.
are things that we wish we could have interpreters do for patients, but they never can. They can never
Yeah.
explain the menu to the inpatients that don't know what a club sandwich is, because they're there with patients in the exam room, in the
Yeah.
emergency room, in the recovery. But there are so many tasks, I think, that would make the entire experience for people coming to the hospital,
Mhm.
filling out forms,
Mhm.
getting information, stuff that is, I don't know how to put it, intransigent, that doesn't change, like an address, a location, what the number is to call, what the process is to file a complaint. There's so much that AI could do and make it so much easier. Even places, and I've said this before, that have staff interpreters
Mhm.
and spend the money to get materials translated into their top languages, when that patient calls, they often don't have a way to get through the phone tree unless they
There
speak
you
English.
go. There you go.
AI could be great for that phone tree, right? So
Absolutely.
why can't we get together and start in the safe places? But I see companies advertising or promoting on social media that their automated interpretation service can be used in any location, including the emergency room or, inpatient unit, a critical care.
Yeah.
We're not there yet.
We're
Why are
not
we going to
close.
ruin what could be a good relationship by jumping the gun like that?
I
So,
will say this, Eliana. I think, particularly in America, we tend to overcorrect and then double, triple, quadruple down on it. And that's why we end up with statements like that that are highly misleading, if not outright false. I'll give you a quick example. So, I love Judge Judy, and I don't pretend not to. And I love watching her. If it's late at night, I'm like, oh, Judge Judy's on. Let me just look at this. It'll be 2 a.m. I'm like, okay, now I can sleep, right? But I love Judge Judy. But what I noticed was at one point, because of the success of the Judge Judy show, right? You started to see 2 and 3 and 20 and 50 judge shows. And yet they started to fail, and no one had that same staying power or longevity, right? There was a small group that was competing, but she was always pretty much tops. Why? Because she was the original. She had set the tone, and everybody else was trying to be a copy of that or take a piece of that and say, okay, now we've got the formula. And I find that's what tends to happen within any industry here, AI in particular. Everybody's saying, or a lot of companies, I should say, not everybody, because I do want to be fair, but they are jumping to this conclusion. This is where I think they would have, and this is the strategist in me, just kind of breaking that down in my own head. One thing I know that AI is able to do now in real time is, and will be able to do even better when it's rolled out on a massive scale, is to detect breast cancer in women at an earlier rate than a physician. Now, what does that mean for the interpreter? It means first that that patient now has health information where they can make decisions that will directly impact their lives and their livelihood far earlier than they would have been before. So if they're an LEP, it means they get earlier access to an interpreter. And that means, but just by that small fact, because the AI made it possible to read their results, they are getting a better healthcare outcome. If it can be detected at stage 2 rather than stage 3 or 4, this is a game changer, right? So I encourage, healthcare facilities to talk about those things because that would really help out. Then from the interpreter's perspective, this is how AI contributes automatically to them having a livelihood. Now that, and it doesn't have to be cancer, but it could be whatever, the AI is able to diagnose at an earlier rate than your standard physician. That's still a tool that's aiding the physician, just as the interpreter is aiding the physician. This means all of the An interpreter, as we know and understand, is the non-clinical member of the clinical team. So this means that LEP gets access to their clinical team much faster. The interpreter is gainfully employed, so AI is not replacing the interpreter. It's actually making it possible for the interpreter to have a job that day, right? And so then what happens? The interpreter's business doesn't tank. Right? The patient gets the help that they need. The provider has provided excellent patient service. And the outcome, I always try not to confuse or misinterpret a good health outcome with good health. A good health outcome to me is having information, having data about my health where I can make a decision and be the empowered patient. I can advocate for myself with the support of my interpreter and my provider and my family if need be. But that's just one example of how AI can empower an LEP, empower an interpreter, empower a team, change an entire outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think, and this is my message to anyone listening to this podcast, that we need to be forming relationship, making friends with our IT counterparts.
Yes.
These conversations. And I'm always attracted to the positive, right? I don't want to go to the anti-war demonstration. I want to go to the pro-peace.
Me too.
Demonstration. So let's work together to find the places where AI is a good fit right now, rather than jump to conclusions all the way to the end of the line. Nobody likes people that cut in line to say,
No,
hey,
we don't.
do everything perfectly and you can get rid of all of your staff. No, we're not there yet. I don't think we're going to be there in the next 5 to 10 years or more.
Yeah.
We need to come together and talk about where can we make process improvements that contribute to efficiency and patient satisfaction.
Oh, definitely.
We do it in a safe way. There's tons of opportunity, and that's what I fear people aren't focusing on. There's so much opportunity.
There's so
All
much
of us
opportunity.
could come out of this with more work than we thought possible, and we have happier patients and families because they actually understand what's happening.
Right. And they feel empowered in the process, right? I agree with you. And I've said the same thing. I'd rather go to a pro something than an anti something. I think, I know for me in particular, that shapes not only my experience and my perception, but it serves as a catalyst for how I operate and how I move and how I, inspire others to move accordingly as well. I tend to be the person, and again, this is probably why I'm drawn to strategy so much, because there's a component of strategy in interpreting, and that to me was the fun part. How do I make these messages understood between these two very different groups, right? Especially in IEP meetings, because those are hard. But there's a strategy in being able to first, I'll say Socrates said one of my favorite quotes, know thyself, right? When I know myself, I'm able to then take information, process it in a way that makes sense to me, and me being that pro or positive leaning person, for me, what that looks like is being solutions oriented. Right? That's what interpreters do. We are solutions oriented. We can't tell people how to fix the problem. We help them fix the problem because the problem is communication, right? Linguistic access and care, right? So I think of myself as being able to do that. If I approach things from a pro perspective, that means I'm always looking for the solution. I acknowledge the issue or the problem for sure. And with AI too, yes, there definitely should be guardrails. It's not the Wild West, nor should we have it be so, because that will derail us from our true north, which is to have it be a supportive tool that takes us into the future, where we can be proactive. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, and, I look forward to one day where we will have, a doctor on board who's AI generated or not, or we can have data on board. What you'll notice is whether you have data or whether you have an AI generated doctor, a holographic doctor on board, what you'll notice always is that they're interacting with humans, not controlling them, not telling them what to do. There are guardrails that need to be set, but I think the relationship, when it works at its best, must be a symbiotic one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So don't hang back, people who are concerned about AI. Inform yourself. Look to see if there's organizations that are doing this work. Right now, I'm working with a group called Safe AI Task Force. Look for that name, Safe AI Task Force, on Google. If you want to do more, speak about it, be heard, have your opinions heard. We're looking for people because this needs to be done as a group effort. It can't be, as you said, some controlling interest. It's a symbiotic process that is going to bring us to the finish line where it's going to have benefits for everybody who participated. So don't hang on the sidelines. Jump in and participate.
Most definitely.
Looking forward to the next year to 5 years. What do you see as something that you're excited to move towards on your timeline, or is of concern? It's wide open. Looking ahead, what's on your horizon, Berthine?
Well, I will say this is great timing because professionally and personally, looking forward, there's one thing that I just found out about. I've been trying to do this for a couple of years. It's been a lifelong goal. I've just been invited to give a TED Talk in New York, and I'm so thank you. I am so excited.
Awesome.
I'm so excited about it. It'll be February 2025. I literally just found out last week. And I mean, ever since I saw my first TED Talk, I was hooked. I love it as a learning and teaching tool. I love it as a way to be able to truly share ideas. I'm deeply honored and excited to be even just to have been there is one thing, but to be giving the actual talk, it's like I get to nerd out in my mind and be joyful and grateful. And, you know, I think about, again, my mom in particular, her immigrant journey here to the United States and how she would have loved to have seen this moment. I know that I'm always looking forward to something. Just I wake up with gratitude first. So I'm gratitude driven. So I'm always looking forward to, you know, seeing my son continue to grow and thrive and defying the expectations, the limiting beliefs that were set before him as a toddler. He has perfect pitch. He's a pianist. He loves math. And that's not something I can say that I love. So he loves math. He's just growing, and I'm so proud of him. And I just can't wait to see the contributing, happy, just joyful member of society that he gets to continue to evolve into being. I'm looking forward to people understanding that differences are good, beyond neurodivergent differences, but differences insofar as, you know, what we look like, the languages we speak, the food we eat, who we are. You know, there's so much more fun to life when you look below that waterline where you see the tip of the iceberg. You know, when we see the complete iceberg that tells everybody about our deeper selves, I'm looking forward to continuing more conversations like this with people, with partnering with people and organizations, to your point, and just growing my presence and contribution in and to the world. I know that sounds super general, but it truly is the thing that I'm excited about. I'm excited about, you know, dialogues, especially because we've had a tumultuous past 5-6 years. You know, we have an election that has changed, that is coming up. You know, and without drawing on my time as a political science professor, it's a part of who I love, what I love to do. But without leaning, you know, political or waxing too political right now, I am excited to see dialogue about differences and continuing to see America evolve. It is not a perfect country, but it is the country of opportunity. It is the country of just people having a goal in mind. And I don't need to agree with everyone. Everyone doesn't need to agree with me. And I've seen a lot of just discourse that's been highly negative. And I say this, racism, sexism, transphobia, I think a lot of it is not based in logic. It is based in fear. And fear cannot govern us. This country would have not existed if people had been afraid. So I think that's what I'm excited about as well. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited about just the journey that we're on as a country. I do get saddened sometimes when I see us derail, but I'm very hopeful right now, in particular, that this country is getting closer to what it promises. Right. So literally, America the Beautiful, I am here for it. So I'm all of it, and I can't wait to get back to Portugal just for vacation.
Absolutely. Here's to more travel, but more importantly, here's to your TED Talk. Here's to more collaboration among disparate groups, be it on a national level or just, interpreters talking to IT people, so that we can be closer to being on track at the start rather than waiting for the inevitable derailment to then go and try to fix and reverse engineer. Let's forward engineer by thinking ahead. And all of this fills me with great excitement for this fall and the end of this year and the coming next 1 to 5 years, when all of this is really going to explode, hopefully in a very good and positive and tailored way, the way that we want, the way that we can see ourselves participating in.
Sure.
It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, enjoying this conversation today, Berthine. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on our podcast. And stay tuned, folks, because we will keep churning these out this year. We see that a lot of you are enjoying them. And let us know what you think about our discussion today, and go join the AI Task Force, the Safe AI Task Force, if you have any concerns at all about AI technology and the profession of interpreting or translating, because fear is not a good place to act from. Fear will inhibit your response, and anger is often rooted in fear. So if we can get out of those two spots, this is the country of yes and. Let's move ahead together. And I welcome you to join the National Council, and I welcome any collaborations from folks. You don't have to be an interpreter or a translator to join the National Council. We are all about language access, and that's everywhere, anytime. Just like you, Berthine. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Eliana. This has been such a joy and a pleasure.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.